Session 10 is giving a personal invitation. I've noticed through the years that there are lots of people who will share their testimony, or they will say something about Jesus to someone that does not know the Lord. That's a pretty big group of folks that will actually do that. Don't have any percentages in mind, but I know that most of the leaders in a church are willing to do at least that. What most of them don't do, and what we all should do, is give people a chance to respond. Giving a personal invitation. Some people say, well, I don't feel qualified. Well, here, let me hold up my hand and just tell you, I hereby qualify you to invite people to receive Jesus. So you're qualified. Anyone, everyone who shares their testimony or shares the gospel can invite people to respond. When we have the opportunity to share, it's always appropriate to invite a response. Now, I think one reason we're hesitant to do that is it's kind of nervous, kind of a nervous situation, waiting for a person to answer. They'll say things like, well, I don't know if I can really do that right now, or like a guy said to me one time, he said, can I? And I said, what do you mean, Brent? He said, well, it's not Sunday, as if the only time you can become a Christian is on Sunday. So you have to be ready for some of those kinds of responses whenever you've shared with somebody. But the important thing is they need to hear themselves responding to that question. Is there any reason, listen, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to trust in Jesus today or right now? You see? They need to hear themselves saying, I really don't want to do that. If that's the case. Because most lost people think they're neutral. They really think they're neutral. And until they hear themselves saying no to the Lord, no to the gospel, they don't experience that crisis of recognition of their true standing before God. Sometimes we think they're rejecting us. But get over that. That's not the issue. They're not really rejecting you. You may feel a little bit of rejection when people turn away, but it's Jesus. It's His name that's on the line, and He can handle it. He can handle rejection. He's had plenty of experience with that. One of the ways that I lead into giving an invitation, I will ask after I share a testimony or a presentation, I'll say, have you ever made a decision like that? Now you'll notice that in the notebook. But that is a very good lead-in. Have you ever made a decision like that? Like what? Well, like I described to you in my testimony and like I showed you when I presented the gospel to you. Have you made that choice? And then if they say, well, no, I never have, you may ask, would you like to pray a prayer like that with me right now? Or would you like to make that decision with me right now? Some may say, even though they've shown every sign of not being a Christian, that they've already made the decision. When that happens, just ask, tell me about that. When did that happen? And you'll learn more about what they're saying. A classic case for me was a former Navy pilot who was training Navy pilots to land on aircraft carriers. His name was Dennis. I'll never forget him as long as I live. He had led me to believe that he wasn't at peace with God, and when I asked him if he'd ever made a decision like I just described, he said, well, yes, I believe I have. I said, well, Dennis, tell me about it. And he began to tell me about a time when he was flying a Navy plane and he thought he was going to run out of fuel. And as he was sharing that story, I said, Dennis, you thought you were going to die, didn't you? And he said, yes, I did. I said, and you cried out to God, didn't you? And he said, yes, I did. I said, Dennis, did you even know what to say? He said, I had no idea. I said, well, Dennis, I can help you know what you need to say to God in order that you would have peace with God, whatever comes. He said, boy, that'd be great. I said, well, let's kneel down together and pray together. And he received Christ. Came for baptism, became a faithful member of the church. Had I just said, oh, well, you've made a decision like that, well, let's wrap this up and I'll get on down the street, we wouldn't have had that experience together. So you have to probe when a person says, I've made that decision. Another student years ago who was a graduate student at a university where I lived, when I asked them if they'd ever made that decision, they said, yes, I have. I said, tell me when. And they had come from Brownsville, Texas, right on the Mexico border. And they said, when I was a child, I went to a vacation Bible school at a Baptist church. And on a special day at that vacation Bible school, I prayed a prayer very similar to the one you just described. So I asked that student, I said, well, were you able to follow through with that? He said, no, I really wasn't. He said, I didn't really become a part of that church. And so we just sort of went back to the basics and prayed together, and God allowed me to have a ministry with him as well. So asking them to tell you about is just an open door to try to pick up in their discipleship wherever they might be, whether it's someone who really hasn't made their peace with God or someone who still has some questions and needs some discipling in their life. Okay. We also, in our outreach, are trying to get people involved in small group experiences. So an invitation also can just be inviting people to come to Bible study. We have folks that have done this training that do a fantastic job of when they're visiting somebody saying, look, I'd like for you to come to my class this Sunday. It's in room, and they'll tell them the room number, and they'll say, if you'll meet me in this certain place, and they'll describe a place on our campus, and they'll meet them there on a Sunday morning and walk with them into the class. You don't know how hard it is for somebody to do that who may be just a little bit timid. And so that is so powerful when you assist them in that way, or even sit with them in a worship service. That's very, very helpful to people who are trying to find their place and who are inexperienced in attending a church like this church. All right? Then finally, the last part of this is to ensure. Offer encouragement for persons who receive Jesus by presenting them with a baptism booklet. Now, I actually have one of those with me today. We keep a lot of these, and they're in every packet when we make visits. I don't expect you to keep one of these with you all the time, but it is a resource that we have. It's just a little Bible study on baptism. What you need to know that is on our website under resources, the same outline that's in this booklet is the basis for the video, Why Baptism? And so that's another thing you can do with a person who's made a decision to help them understand how baptism relates to the decision to follow Christ. Encourage people to make a public decision. Offer to walk forward with them if they are reluctant about that, or bring them into contact with one of our pastors' leaders so that we can work with them in that decision. As I said already, meet them for Bible study, help them find their way to a class. I also strongly advocate inviting them to meet you at the church on a weekday and let you give them a tour of the building. All of those kinds of things help people not feel so awkward about attendance and participation. People who have preschoolers need to know where the preschool is. If they have children, they need to know where the children's division is. If they have teenagers, they need to know where the youth meet. If they have single adults in their household, they need to know about the single adult ministry. And one of the best ways you can do that is to come to the building. If you need assistance, there are people in our office always who can help you with that. I give lots of tours, but that's a very important part of ensuring. So giving an invitation is not just about inviting people to receive Jesus. It's inviting people to take steps that will help them grow as followers of Christ.